This is a video that I have put off making for a long time, and I've put it off because it's a pretty sensitive topic, and I think I need to be pretty careful when talking about it. And with that in mind, I of course need to say that I am not a doctor. None of this is medical advice. All of this is just my opinion, my experience, and you can do with it what you will, but it is absolutely not medical advice. From the outset, I think it's important to say that I'm not avoiding medication for any strong ideological reasons. I'm not on some sort of heroic crusade to prove that I don't need pharmaceutical companies and that they're evil or anything like that, although they might be evil. I'm coming at this from the perspective actually of a software engineer, interestingly enough. And I've talked about this in a couple of previous videos, but I'm a software engineer by trade, and as a software engineer, one thing that we think about quite a lot is dependencies, and that is because when you're building software, and I think if you're not in the software industry, you probably don't appreciate this, but most of the software you use is actually built of lots of different software that's kind of pulled together, right? So, for example, if you play a game, there's a good chance that the people that made that game are using what is called a game engine, which is a piece of software developed by someone else, and then you build your game on top of that piece of software. And that software becomes a dependency, right? Now, when something is a dependency, it's in the name, you depend on it. And in the world of software engineering, if I'm going to build a piece of software and I'm going to introduce a dependency to another piece of software, I want to be very careful about that dependency. I want to make sure that the dependency I'm introducing is safe to introduce, right? So if I'm building a piece of software and it's going to become a business, if I'm depending on someone else's software, well, I probably want to make sure that their business is pretty good, that they're not going to just break this thing or remove this thing that I depend on from the market, right? These are things that I need to kind of consider. This actually happened recently with a game engine called Unity, where lots of people were building games with Unity and then they changed their pricing model. That would have completely screwed over a lot of the people that were building games using that game engine. Now, when you have such a heavy dependency on something like a game engine, there's not much you can do, right? They changed their pricing model. If you've been working on your game for a couple of years, you're kind of bought in. It's probably prohibitively expensive to change at that point. So the point is, you need to be careful about dependencies. And in the world of software engineering, we think about this a lot. We think about dependencies a lot. And when I was first diagnosed with psoriatic arthritis, the first thing that happened was I was put in contact with a company that produces a biologic called Humira. And I had to go and take some blood tests to make sure I didn't have some form of latent TB, because taking this particular biologic can increase your risk of infection, among other things. And I kind of started going down the whole process. I got the information pack about the biologic and all that sort of stuff. And I decided at that point that I wasn't going to take the drug. And the reason, again, going back to my software engineering story, is that it would be introducing a fairly heavy dependency in my life on this pharmaceutical company. I would be depending on this company and the supply chain that gets this drug into my hand. And that just didn't sit right for me. And again, this is a very personal thing. I'm not saying you or anyone else should think like this, but I didn't like the idea of being in a position where, for example, let's say there's a shortage of this drug, where I've been living my life for 5 years, and all of a sudden there's a shortage and I can't get my hands on it. And then what happens to me if I can't take it? Like, do I crash back into like far worse symptoms of arthritis or something like that? This company could also change their pricing model. There's a whole load of kind of potential drawbacks of introducing such a dependency. So in a true software engineering mindset sort of way, I evaluated this as a dependency. I evaluated the risk versus reward of introducing the dependency versus not introducing the dependency, and decided that I didn't want it. That I did not want to depend on this pharmaceutical company. This isn't a drug that you can just take one day and say, oh, do you know what, I'm done with this for now. Like, you go on it and you have to taper off it, and it's all very regimented and you have to be very careful. There are obviously a lot of side effects with it as well. There are things like cancer, increased risk of infection. There's side effects that are, potentially affect the nervous system, resulting in things like MS. And all of these side effects, they tell you that the chances are minimal, that it's probably not going to be an issue for you. And that's fine. Of course, they're going to say that, and they do have to disclose all of the side effects, no matter how minor. But again, pharmaceutical companies aren't the most trustworthy people in the world. Just going historically, if you do a bit of research or go watch that Painkiller show, not the most trustworthy people in the world. So all of this kind of factors into do I want this dependency along with the potential side effects versus what is the reality of living without it? Now, the reality of living without it isn't some kind of rosy romantic picture of living life free of a disease, in harmony with nature, skipping through the woods, birds landing on my shoulders and whatever else. Like managing a disease like this holistically, it's a lot of work and it's a slog, and it can actually be isolating in a lot of ways where I can't just live my life in the kind of normal way, the way my friends and family do. Like going out for dinner is a problem, just getting a takeaway is a problem. I need to be really on top of the food I'm eating. I need to prioritize exercise to the point that, like, going to the gym, that is kind of my number one priority. Everything else will be dropped ahead of that. I mean, I'm getting married in 6 weeks, and I'm already thinking about, well, the drinking that I'm going to be doing that day and the food I'm going to eat, and will I be able to go to the gym 2 days later, right? I'm thinking about all of this stuff. So it is a kind of a full-time, really all-consuming thing that can be somewhat draining, that can be somewhat isolating. So I don't want to paint this rosy picture of life without the drug. But again, these are trade-offs and these are decisions you have to make. And for me, it's been working so far. Like just this past week, I hit new personal bests in deadlifting, squatting, and bench pressing in the gym. I've lifted and pressed the heaviest that I've ever pressed, and squatted and deadlift. And, my mobility has been good. My pain levels have been low, and it has been working well. But this isn't like a quick fix or something that you can just do. This is years of consistency, years of kind of learning about my body and how to approach exercise and how to approach diet and all these things. Like, it's been a long time, and it takes a lot of consistency, and it's boring and it's dull and it's mundane. And like I said, can be isolating. But that's what I've decided to do. That was my decision. That was the trade-offs I was willing to make. If over the next 3 months, my condition deteriorated to the point where I wasn't able to exercise, I couldn't get out of bed, life was a struggle because of my symptoms, would I take the drug? Yes, I would. That is the point where it would be acceptable for me to introduce the dependency, right? So again, I'm not on some moral crusade here. I'm not saying that all of these drugs should be avoided at all costs. They can be life-changing, but for me, again, there's the point where the dependency becomes acceptable to me. For anyone else, I do think that if you're really struggling and if you're in a lot of pain and your life is being seriously negatively impacted, take the medication. But I've said this before, be mindful of the fact that this medication can stop working and you may be only left with lifestyle interventions. So don't go in and take the medication blindly and say, oh, I'll just take my injection and I'm going to live whatever way I want. I think that's a big mistake. And if there's one piece of advice that I'd be willing to give in this video, everything else was just me and my opinions and my lifestyle. But if there's one piece of advice, it would be do whatever you can or do whatever you need to do to be able to live the life that allows you to maintain the disease without the drugs, if that makes sense. So the point being, if currently you can't exercise because the pain is too bad, well, try and get the biologics to reduce the pain so that you can exercise, and then start looking at your diet and looking at your sleep and get all of that stuff in order with the support of the medication. So if the medication stops working, at least you've sorted out the lifestyle stuff. If you go through years of trying medications and eventually that stops working, and then you have to, go from the pit of despair and pain that of the medication stop working, and you have to claw your way up to the lifestyle interventions that might help, that's going to be really, really difficult. So I think it is in your best interest to don't use the drug as a savior, use it as a support, and still focus on doing all of the lifestyle things that are going to help you manage this condition. Anyway, hopefully that was useful. That's kind of all I've got. That's my official position on the medication and managing arthritis and self-managing arthritis. If you have any questions or comments, please throw them in the comment section if you find this stuff useful. Like and subscribe, all that good stuff. And other than that, have a great day. Thank you for watching.